Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Van Holt's back again with another E-commerce Conversations. Hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the Internet from me, Matthew. Is it Gattozzi?
You got it right.
Oh, man.
That's a good first guess.
For the regular listeners, I have about a 50-50 shot of getting the guest's last name correct, which is quite embarrassing. It should be embarrassing, but yeah, man. First thing I'm going to ask, first thing we should talk about is, who the hell are you with?
Yeah. So my name's Matthew. Excited to be here. And my company is Goodo Studios. We create content for consumer brands. So we make photos and videos that convert viewers into customers. We make ads, we make TikToks. We do it all from cinema cameras to iPhones and everything else in between. And I'm excited here to talk about content.
Yeah. I mean, that's the name of the game in D2C, I think, is like, how do you produce content? I mean, obviously your product needs to matter. And I don't know if I've ever, are you a photographer by trade or?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you've got a pretty interesting story because in a past life, you were not a photographer, but you were in the creative space.
Yeah, I was a professional ballet dancer before I did all what I do now, which is a crazy, intense, 14-year journey, starting at 8 years old. And I was training every day, did a lot there, was professional, got to dance all over. I was actually in Austin dancing at Ballet Austin, and then I injured my back. So I had to stop that part of my career young. And now I've shifted to photos and videos.
Dude, your quads got to be like as big as my waist.
Yeah, my calves are, I think, a little overdeveloped. So.
Yeah. You dunk a basketball? Like, do you get some serious height?
No, I do not get that height. I am still short, so I don't have like long arms or long legs, but I had to, do other things to make up for it.
What's funny is we used to have a team member here in Beard Brand, Derek Davis. I don't know if you know him or not, but he also was a ballet dancer. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's about the amount of exposure I have to ballet. That's my breadth of knowledge. But the business is here in Austin. Did you used to live here in Austin and then you moved to Seattle?
Yeah. So I just moved to Seattle a little less than a year ago. Prior to living in Austin, that's actually where I was dancing. So I've been here before. I met my wife there. And so things have changed with COVID and everything was online. So I didn't need to be in Austin anymore. And we wanted to get back to the Northwest. So that's why we moved. But yeah, started the business in Austin after my dance career.
Now, your business, is it just you? Are you the primary photographer or do you have a team of photographers that you work with?
Yeah, great question. So it did just start out with just me. And actually, I started out not even in e-commerce. I was just like local businesses, just trying to get my name out there and honestly just get my portfolio out there. So I was working with a lot of amazing restaurants in Austin, but shifted because of COVID and, my business basically went like down and I had to kind of rebuild it. But now we have a team where I'm working with photographers, other creatives, other creators in this space, as well as other editors. So now it's not just me, which is awesome, but it is a few of us, like maybe about 4 or 5. And then I contract people out depending.
In a past life, I used to have a business as a graphic designer or website kind of person and building WordPress websites. I can't imagine there's a lot of creatives who listen to this podcast, but if there are any out there, the key to being a creative and finding success, in my opinion, is really niching down and like understanding who your client is rather, because a photographer, you can take pictures of anything, right? Buildings, products, food. It's not until you really like build that portfolio that's towards something specific that I think you can get a lot of traction. But it's risky too, because you have to turn down a lot of work to get there. How was that transition for you?
That's such a good point. And I think, when I look at my journey, when I first started out, I really needed to say yes to everything because I didn't come from kind of that background where like a lot of consultants in our space now, like, they went to school, they went to brand side, then eventually they already know the space and then they're just going to kind of zero in on their like service or whatever. But I didn't go to college. I was supposed to be dancing till I was 30 and I was 21 and I didn't have a job. I couldn't get into, even though I knew a lot about social media, couldn't get another job. People weren't like looking because I just didn't have a resume that said I had a college degree. So I ended up having to kind of say yes to everything. And that was really hard, but it was really good because I was able to kind of see what I wanted to do and really like what kind of creative I wanted to actually, go out and create. But where my success came from and has really been from just narrowing down. And that's hard. It's hard, especially as a creative, because it's like, there's lots of ways to make money. And sometimes it's easy because you see like, oh, I could do that gig for, a few $1,000. Like that's easy, but that's also going to be distracting. So you have to say no to that to go out and find the type of business that you really want to establish yourself. And I think the other thing as a creative is that I ended up realizing that it wasn't about the other photographers and videographers that I knew, because those people aren't hiring me. Those people are not the ones that are paying, my bills. And I quickly realized that I also need to change how I communicate with the people that I'm serving. And I realized, oh, it's the marketing managers, it's the paid media people. Those are the people that like need my services. So I need to start kind of taking what I do as a creative and translating it into how they talk so that I can get business. And that was another thing that I really had to learn. And I think a lot of creatives aren't able to make that translation because they just are so focused on the camera gear, the camera settings, but the person paying them could care less about those things. You need to understand how that stuff works, but you also need to understand where these photos and videos that you create are going to be used. And I think I was able to kind of unlock that, and that also helped kind of establish myself in the space.
Now, you guys are listing some of the darlings of D2C as clients. How were you able to attract them and kind of get on their radar? You would imagine that they've got their photographers established and, really, like, how do you get your foot in the door for something like that?
Yeah, honestly, first off, I just feel super lucky with what I get to do. And I think sometimes I do need to take a step back and say like, wow, this is amazing that we get to create content for brands. I think the way that we've been able to work with really established brands as well as like up and coming brands is kind of going back to the translation is we actually really understand how this content is going to be used and leveraged for revenue. At the end of the day, these brands are investing in content to be created, but they also have the mindset that that content is bringing in, is generating revenue. So we've been able to speak to that and help actually build out strategies for brands to use content and leverage that to actually drive revenue, whether that's on their organic channels or on their product pages, websites, or anything like that. The other thing is that we've been able to adapt to how media has been consumed. So when I started Goodo Studios 2 years ago, TikTok really was not even a thing. Like when I was doing photography, most of the time it was like I was shooting videos horizontally. Now it's like you're only shooting vertically, right? And so I think instead of me being this hardcore artist and saying, no, I'm going to stick it to the man and I'm going to do my thing, I said, how do I adapt to what's being created? And I think that's also really helped us to be able to work with some of these brands because a lot of these big brands, you'd be surprised like how much they don't really have a content engine. And so because we've kind of set up an engine ourselves, they can just kind of plug in and use it. So we can help them do TikToks, we can help them do user generated content, but we can also help them do kind of the high end stuff or, paid media advertisement type thing. So that's really allowed us to and opened up maybe the possibilities comparative to a traditional photographer or traditional videographer path, if you will.
When I think of photographers, I do think a lot of kind of the artists. And one of the things that really stands out to me is the whole world of copyrights and like the ownership of photography, who owns the photographs and the licenses to that. How do you guys handle that process?
That's a really good question. And, my approach now, which I'll go into, is I think just try to be as generous as possible. I think that I've seen, even as I've been trying to get models for a shoot, and I'll go to like a pretty big traditional modeling agency, and the fees are just insane. And I think that there's a maybe disruption ready to be had in this kind of industry. You see it like in big advertisement or in like big Hollywood productions, just like all the, not even unions, but just layers and layers and layers of fees and things like that. And what I've tried to be for brands is humble and serving. If I can have those two components to it, that really helps. And part of that is just saying like, hey, you can use this content, like you're investing in these photos and videos, you get complete rights, copyright uses, like commercial use all the way through. There's no licensing to it and all that. And maybe I might lose out because I'm not nickeling diming the brand, but I think long term, what I'm trying to do is establish a relationship with them versus being like, no, I'm going to fit you in this box and like you're going to have to work around me and kind of bend around the rules. I've kind of tried to be as, I guess, non-traditional in that way. Again, I know that there will be artists out there that will say you should know your worth, you should put your foot down and all that. But I think what I want to do is basically kind of change how we go out and produce content. And I want to be in those conversations with those big brands. And I'm not going to get there unless I do something different. So I'm really trying to build those relationships and build up with those brands versus try to nickel and dime them based on licensing. I don't know. Maybe that's not a good thing, but that's just how I see it.
I'll speak from my own personal preference. And it's really like, I've worked with both. We had an amazing photographer do a shoot for us and she brought out help and the photos turned out great. It was incredible work. Very proud of it. But she kind of had, different licenses, like you're paying, for 4 photos that you can use in these places. And then the rest of them you can only use in this place. And if you ever do this, you got to do this. And then it's like, man, I've got all these photos, but I don't really keep track of what the license is for all the photographs. And then if somebody like rips it off the internet and they start using it and, are they accusing us of being, friendly with that stuff? If we have affiliates, can we give the affiliates the photography? I just want to have photographs and like you said, be able to use it for wherever I need it. And chances are I'm not. Like chances are it's going to be like this one project and kind of go on. But along the same lines, in 2022 and also into the future, the name of the game is production, I think. It's not about like the most amazing one-time photo that you've created, maybe for your homepage landing page or something. But from an ad perspective, it's like every week you need to be cranking out content. And if you're a photographer listening to this or a creative listening to this, I think like you're cutting off your nose and spite your face if you stick to that old model that so many photographers kind of grew up in.
Yeah. And I definitely came from more of that traditional route. And I thought that was the route that I was going to get in. And then with COVID, I really got into e-commerce and I was really humbled by it. Like I really had to think about how I'm going to kind of rebuild my business, but also work with these brands. And I also saw just the landscape of what, iOS 14 was doing, how that was changing, even just media buying in general. And so I had to adapt kind of our services to really fit the needs for the brands. And I think that's been really valuable. And I think one of the biggest things that we see now is like creative strategy. Like that's really a big word. And I think in general, people are talking about content creation. And I think on the creative side, big advertisement side, which is a space that I definitely want to like grow into and like definitely disrupt. And I think one of the things that they're missing out on is just being adaptable to how fast media is and even just how fast like brands need to be creating. And so what we're trying to do is really build that content engine for the brands, whether that's, coming up with ideas, testing those ideas and actually like executing those ideas. And I think right now, like where production is, it can be super disjointed. Like you might have a great photographer, but that photographer is not a part of the planning. They don't really understand how these photos can actually be created and actually make revenue for a brand, and why there's super small differences, but that could actually change the conversion rate of your product page. They're not in those conversations, and big advertisements the same way. And so I think that a lot of the creative world is about to get really shaken up. But I think the people that can adapt to how brands really need content will be great. So I think it's not worth it to go and nickel and dime on a licensing fee when that's great for like print if you're like shooting editorial stuff for Vogue, but most brands aren't. Like 9, 10, 11 figure brands are not even doing that. So having that licensing fee doesn't really make sense. So I'm trying to change my model to be more of a modern model, if you will, to adapt to how content's created and consumed by people.
You've been talking a lot about, producing content that converts. Like, what is the, I guess this is the golden question that everyone wants answered, but how do you do that? How do you create content that converts, especially from like a photography or a videography standpoint?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times people try to figure out the how, like, oh, should we do a compare and contrast, or should we do user generated content? Should we shoot on an iPhone versus a camera? You never buy through an advertisement because of the camera that it was shot on, or like the lens that they used and whatever, right? You act on something because of the emotion it created that actually made you, or maybe it hit, maybe the writing spoke to you, whatever, something spoke to you that made you create an action or take action on that advertisement. And so I think now the thing that most brands really need to focus on is, why are customers buying? And a lot of times what people will do is, well, people are buying because, and then they'll list out their product features. Okay, cool. But what do the customers really say? And like, you really need to understand your customers. You need to talk to your customers. You need to do surveys. Like, you need to do a lot more in terms of like understanding your customer psychology, because from there, the ideas are endless, right? Then you can get into all of how you want to create and whatnot. But I think most brands are missing out on that. And so what I talk about is like the intent behind the photos and the videos, right? So if there's a specific reason why customers buy like your beard oil, let's say, I would want to then craft that whole image and lifestyle. And I want the models to be your ideal customers. I want to know all of those things, what's in their mind, like where would they be, all those things, to create that image that just makes sense so that people feel a part of your brand and feel part of, like, they want to buy your thing. And so I think that most brands are missing out on understanding the intention, and that really dictates the photos or the images. And that goes back to, my creative friends. I love them. They make beautiful images, but if they're not understanding why customers are buying, then those images look really pretty and that's it. And so I hope that our process and how we think about content really goes to the why and then to the what and the how.
Earlier, you were talking about your content engine. Walk me through how you guys can produce content. I think of primarily photography, if we're talking about photography, like kind of studio setup, like for product photography, knockouts. And then, as you mentioned, like lifestyle photography, where you're bringing clients in or you're creating scenes. All that's currently set up in Austin still, or is it in Seattle as well? Or how do you produce content in a way that allows it to be done quickly and at a high enough standard that your clients are going to find success in it?
Yeah, great question. So really there's 3 ways that we work. It is the photo shoots and the video shoots, but we also do like TikToks and UGC. And then we also do like ad editing. So we're just taking assets that are already been created and we extract value from that. So really when a brand comes to us first, before we start shooting like high-end videos and photos, unless they have like a brand release or a product release or something, like we first start with just editing. So we look at, okay, why are customers buying? We go through a whole process to figure that part out. Then we come up with, okay, here are the tests and the things that we want to create, whether it's statics, videos, here are the hooks, yada, yada, yada. And then we take their already pre-existing content library and try to extract as much value out of it. Most brands have a lot of like great content out there. They just haven't remixed it enough just because they just don't have the resources or mainly like the manpower to like just do all that editing. It's just a lot. And so we first start there. Then the second range of where we really start is now that we've got some ideas going, now that we've kind of proven out some concepts, now let's actually double down and scale those concepts and test even more. That's where we can maybe bring in some creators that we work with that are kind of like ideal customer for that brand. We come up with the briefs and all that, and then we send the product out to those people. They shoot everything, come back, we edit it all, and then send it off. And so that can be remote. And then the last part is, okay, now that we're going to do some of those high-end photos and videos, they can send the stuff to either Seattle. Sometimes we have a photographer in Austin still, so we might send it there as well, just depending on like what the production is and whatnot. And then, yeah, we'll kind of hire out a crew, whether it's in Seattle or in Austin, to kind of work on the production. And that's kind of how we like turn around. So I would say like we don't do like photos and videos, like hardcore production with a brand on a month-to-month basis, but we do really do a lot of the monthly editing month to month, and that's kind of how we do it. And that gives us time to plan out those shoots and give us a really good time. But the other thing is that it helps us know what to shoot so we can feel really good about what we're shooting. Because I think a lot of brands feel hesitant to do a bigger budgeted production if they think, oh, is this going to flop? So if you can really test out your concepts early on with some like low lift creative, then you can go to those bigger productions. And that's how I think you can win on like a visual brand as well as performance side.
Do you feel like most of the content you're producing is going to be for advertising then? Or how many of your brands that you're working with are leaning onto organic as a channel?
I want more brands to lean on organic. That's a main reason why I've been a huge fan of you guys for so long is the organic channel. I think it's so strong. I think so many brands, like, I understand why it's hard to invest in it because you are spending a lot of money to invest in this channel that really pays off long term. But like, I mean, you can attest like how beautiful it is when you can actually build real community around the content and around the people in your videos. It's just like, it's unmatched. So I wish that more brands, if any brand is listening and they want to do like, build out a whole YouTube channel and really go hard, like I would be 100% down. So there are like maybe one or two brands that are doing like TikTok organic, where they are investing in that organic channel, which is great. But majority of what we're creating is for ads, which I totally understand. And I think it's really important. But I definitely would love to see more brands go to the organic side because I think long-term is really strong. We definitely have to create the right expectations for that though. And so that is something that can be challenging in terms of like a client relationship for that part.
Are the clients pretty good about getting you the data back on which ads are converting the best or which creative is converting the best for you? And how much, I guess this is a two-part question, how much kind of quote unquote hand-holding or communication or like management, for lack of better terms, is going on with the brands and you guys? Is it generally hands-off or do you guys work together in a very collaborative way?
I want the experience to feel like we are an in-house team. That's what I try to do. So we have a Slack channel. So we go really like we can, go back and forth like that. In terms of data, we usually get access to their Facebook ads manager, TikTok ads manager. If they use like a Triple Whale or a Northbeam, like we also get access to that as well. So we get to see like what's being done in the accounts and like how things are being pushed. And that's super helpful. When it comes to communication with the clients, like we definitely, try to have open communication about what's working, what's not. And then we really go through like, hey, this is why it's working or not working. And then here are the changes that we can make next month to improve upon this or whatever. And I think that it's not that it's hands off, but I think the best clients that I think thrive with us are the ones that give us the most trust us and give us the most, creative freedom. So we want to be able to collaborate because we need to understand their product and they understand their product way better than us. They understand their audience way better than us. So it takes some time to kind of download that information. But holistically, the goal is that we can really just be their like almost in-house team without it having to be like paying for, 4 or 5 people in-house.
One thing I did want to touch base on is the whole people element of it. In a creative space, it's funny. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and, it seems like the bottleneck is ultimately like the decision maker of like, what is good photography? And there's, in my opinion, or what is good creative, what is good content? There's so much bad content out there. Like, how do you either hire the type of talent to produce good content when you yourself don't know how to do it? Or B, how do you become better at understanding what is good content or not good content?
Yeah, hiring is hard. Hiring good creatives is hard. I definitely try to foster a space where people feel like they can have that flexibility. I think when you think about having a creative person internally, you have to understand that they're creative. They are not a data, like you can't force them into a space. You got to let them kind of breathe. Like that's where art comes from, right? And so I think that is where a lot of brands kind of struggle when they are trying to retain talent, is because let's say they bring on somebody to do like TikTok and they're just pushing them. But it's like, it's so hard to be on camera. It is hard. Like they need to have breaks. So you need to be able to create that space for the creative to be creative. So that's definitely one thing. I think that when it comes to like finding talent or like hiring, or how do you like spot it, ask the person's process. Like, I think it's really important. It's definitely taken me time. So I'm speaking from my growth, if you will, like of coming up with this process and like sharing that and helping people understand what that looks like. And so I think the best creatives are the ones that really have a process and they can walk you through step by step what that would look like, from timeline to, like everything, like the apps that they're going to use, what it should look like, what it should feel like. That person obviously has like a lot of experience, and that's really, really valuable. And then I think that looking at work, like asking for a portfolio, like this is definitely one of those things where, it's a visual thing, right? So I think it is kind of hard, but I think that if you don't understand like photography, like if you don't understand like camera settings, it's actually better because consumers don't either. So it's kind of a field. It's like you see it and you're like, does this fit my brand or not? I know that we could definitely shoot some great content for certain brands, but like the style that we've put out, it just hasn't connected with them and it just hasn't worked. And that's totally okay. So I think you got to definitely figure out, looking at the creative style, have they done work like this in the past that you feel comfortable to make that investment? And I think just making sure that there's a space for those creatives to thrive if they are internally. I think that we're not there yet in terms of where creatives are internally. I think TikTok is moving that way. I think creative strategist is kind of coming into the mix. So I think that these new creative roles that actually have a real business function are unclear right now, but I think we'll have some definition in the next few years.
I'll kind of agree with you. I think from my perspective, there's a lot of challenge from like a video editor standpoint and looking at their portfolio, because, like what part did they actually have to do in the video? Because so many people touch
That's true.
a video. You have your director, you have your producer. Were they just simply editing it and the producer was telling them where to make all the cuts and how to piece together? Or were they the one who was crafting the story and, bringing that all together? So it's kind of interesting. I think like to a certain degree, if you can do like test projects or smaller projects with them and just see how they work too, is a great way. I think the beauty of the creative industry is there's a lot of freelance people. So they're willing to kind of do side gigs or work late at night to be able to work on your project for a couple extra dollars, or at least I've found that in our space that we play in. But it is hard if you don't know what to look for, or you don't know how to communicate what you like about something. Very common.
And,
go ahead.
Well, that is a good creative is somebody that can ask really great questions and somebody that can help you translate that and pull out what you really want. A bad creative is going to say, okay, got it, and just go. Whereas the best creatives are the ones that ask the most questions, because they are going to really pinpoint what's your problem. And so even brands that come to us, they might say like, this is what we need. But I say, before I'm like, okay, great, let's do it. I ask them questions. I want to know where they've been, like, where's their marketing been? Like, where are they trying to go? Why do they need a creative partner? Really trying to dig in. And then sometimes after the first call, we realize, wow, you don't need photos. You actually just need to, like, do some editing, and I'll save you thousands and thousands of dollars, But I think it's people that ask the right questions to kind of pull it out, because it is hard to describe this feeling or this thing that you see in your mind. And I think creatives need to get better at kind of bridging that gap in terms of talking about it, or how to, discuss it with marketing managers and directors and things like that.
Who knew, man? If you can communicate, you're worth more and bring a lot more value that way. Where can people support you? Where can they follow you? Where can they hire your services?
Yeah, just reach out to me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, and you can see a lot about, content, behind the scenes, all that good stuff. So you can reach out to me there. Our website's goodostudios.com. You can set up a call, and I have a really cool newsletter called Your Content Should Sell. And it's just really about teaching you about how photos and videos, ads, and all that can help you sell your products. So you can sign up. It's linked in my bio on Twitter.
What's your Twitter bio handle?
Matthew Gattozzi. Super simple.
One word.
Yep. All one word.
All right. Well, this has been another e-commerce conversations. I hope you guys listening enjoyed it as much as I did. Hopefully you got a couple nuggets of information in your brain now. Matthew, thanks for being on the show. Cheers.
Thank you.
Keep
Cheers.
on growing.